Okay, let's go. Fuck it, let's go with this. Oh, I don't know. Plam, you ain't got the fucking minerals, son. Problem is I haven't. Now let's play it safe. Let's go with this. Do you know what? I'm not even sure about this. God, I'm a boring bastard, and why change the habit of a lifetime? Okay, let's play it safe. Let's go with this one. Okay, run VT. Struth cobbers, it's fucking bearing here. Yes, that's right. Bear fucking canting ing. Downing a few tinny set with a few Sheilas here. Round the billabong. Some kind of shit like that. Anyway. Why don't you put a few more fucking prawns on the barbie? Maybe spear a few barbies with your prawn, you know what I'm fucking saying? While I down this here Castlemaine 4X and introduce this video here by this cunt Riley J. Dennis. Oh, sugar tits, do you think we maybe overdid it on the sherry?
There are people living today in 2016 who honestly believe that the earth is flat. Now the thing is, those people are allowed to have that opinion. You're allowed to have whatever opinion you want. But that doesn't mean that that opinion is valid or that it should be a part of our modern discourse. Because I think we can all accept, or at least most of us, that the earth is not flat. The earth is round. We live in a solar system. We orbit around the sun. And these are just basic facts that we have to accept because we know them to be true because there's a lot of scientific evidence. But like with most things, it's a theory. It's a very well accepted theory, but it's a theory nonetheless, like the theory of gravity, which I think we all pretty much accept as fact at this point, but it's still a theory. But flat earthers have their own theory, and they have their own ways of explaining away our scientific evidence to suit their agenda. The reason I bring this up is because I think it's a really obvious example that we can all think about and conceptualize. Like, we all know that the earth is round, and we can all laugh about how ridiculous it is that there's still a group of people that believe the earth is flat. So I think we would also agree that it would be very ridiculous to have a debate in today's day and age with a round earther and a flat earther, and to have them present their evidence and like make an argument for it and make a big spectacle out of it. That would be false balance. That would be pretending that these two sides have equal weight and we have to talk about both if we're going to talk about one.
Yes, I've got a hat on. So this is a video response to Riley J. Dennis. Before I get into that, I suppose I ought to thank Bearing for that wonderful traditional Australian introduction there, full of wonderful traditional Australian, well, it's full of swearing really, I suppose, which is about as traditional Australian as anything, isn't it there? So thank you, Bearing, for that. Riley, what I've got to say to you is, you talk about flat earth theory, why we don't debate flat earth theory. You erroneously claim, I think, that the reason that we don't debate flat earth theorists is because there is not enough validity to their arguments. I propose to you that fundamentally the reason we don't debate flat earth theorists is simply because there aren't any, or there are practically none. 99.999% of people believe in a spherical earth, and fundamentally that is the primary reason that we don't debate flat earth theorists.
And this applies, surprise, surprise, to a lot of other stuff going on in our world, socially and politically. Let's take climate change, for example. There is a ton of scientific evidence for climate change, and yet there are still people who deny it, and we're supposed to treat them like they have a valid argument, but they don't, because the science is in, and we know that climate change is happening, and that it's caused by humans.
So Riley, this is a perfect example that you've picked here of where we're differing here, right? Because climate change denialism is something that we need to engage with. It is something I propose that we need to debate over. And the difference is this, right? It doesn't really matter a crap that you don't think there's any evidence for climate change denialism. It doesn't matter that I don't think there's any evidence for climate change denialism. The fact is that unlike the flat earth theorists, a lot of people think that there is good evidence for climate change denialism, and that is the difference between the two things. A lot of people believe it, and that is why we need to engage with debate on subjects like that.
And I feel like that especially happens in politics. Like, people who consider themselves politically in the center feel like they're right just because they're in the center. They see themselves as the compromise of the left and the right. They see themselves as taking the good from the left and the good from the right and rejecting the bad from the left and the bad from the right, and they are the perfect compromise. But that's just not how it works. Like, being in the middle of two arbitrary points doesn't automatically make you right. The compromise is not always a good thing.
Okay, do you know what, Riley, my friend, I think you got a little bit confused there. You started talking about what you described it as centrism, but it was more than that. What you were describing wasn't just somebody who just happens politically on the spectrum to be central. You were discussing radical centrism, because what you were talking about is somebody who looks to the left, the political left, looks to the political right, and takes the best of of both ideological political wings and brings them together. And it's fundamentally pragmatic rather than sort of ivory tower ideological, in that you're trying to pick things together that you think will actually work in the real world, rather than some exercise in moral grandstanding, which actually both political wings are equally capable of doing in their own ways. So that is what it's about. But then you kind of went a little bit off the rails in that, well, what you did then was you said something about it was about taking a compromise middle position, and that's not always the best position to take. Isn't a position that's sort of equidistant from both sides? Of course it isn't. But that isn't what you were describing, which was radical centrism, which is to take the best. And it might be that on one issue the best lies squarely on the left. It might be that the best lies squarely on the right. That shouldn't matter if you're a radical centrist, as long as by going squarely on the left or right you can sell it to people and make it work for the people at large, then that is an acceptable thing to do. So I think you got a little bit confused somewhere down the line there.
On one side, we have people saying that LGBT plus people deserve respect, should be treated equally under the law, and should be protected from discrimination. And on the other side, we have people saying that LGBT plus people should be denied their basic human rights and not be treated equally under the law. These are not equal stances. We do not get to find compromise between them.
Well, except that you do, and in a democracy sometimes you might have to, Riley, whether you like it or not.
When we're talking about our humanity and our rights, we have a right to fight for those in their entirety, not in pieces as we compromise.
Yes, you do.
There is no compromising on our basic human rights.
And yet we do all the time. This is a very cornerstone of the business of social living in being able to organise as societies, is that we have to compromise in that way. With the whole Jordan Peterson debate, one of the classic lines with regard to that from some of his opponents is that human rights are not open for debate. But it always seems to be in terms of the human rights that that person wishes to champion. It's never somebody else's human rights, is it? If it's LGBT plus human rights, they're not open for debate, but it does mean that somebody else's human rights will be. Maybe somebody with a very conservative religious perspective, their rights will have to be open for debate, because the reality of it is that at times one right clashes up against another. And so what do we do if we don't have a debate? Do we just not have a discussion about it and just let people have a fucking fist fight over it? The very business of society, even the fundamentals of going out to work, even the fundamental business of me selling my labour, going out there. I am providing perhaps my time and my resources, right? And I'm going to get some financial remuneration for that. And that financial remuneration should be worth the resources that I have given. But a portion of that, about 20% of that, just goes to the state in tax. Now, I have no problem paying tax. I think it's a good thing. But I have to forego some of my basic rights of ownership there to take part in that kind of scheme. We all do, Riley. And these are fundamental things that we have to do, fundamental compromises that we have to make all the time just for society to function at its most basic level.
Because people tweet me or comment on my videos or something saying, you won't debate this idea, it's because you're afraid you're going to lose. That's not how that works. That's not a logical conclusion to come to when someone doesn't want to debate you. There's like 1.5 million reasons someone might not want to debate you, but one of those might be you just don't have a valid viewpoint and you're not worthy of being debated. You are the flat earther of whatever your topic is.
Do you know, I just don't get it, Riley. I just don't get your reasoning. I understand you're trying to explain your reasoning, but it's just not working for me. I can understand if you don't think somebody has a valid argument, you're not going to want to entertain that same fucking argument with 100 different people in 100 different exchanges, are you? That's going to get really tiresome. It's tiresome enough even if somebody does have a valid argument. If they don't, I could understand why you wouldn't want to do that, if that was how you felt about their position, right? But when you're talking about a subject, and I know that you're most concerned about these trans issues because these are issues that affect you, I quite understand that, and I know you feel that people don't have valid arguments there, but you must appreciate that there are a lot of people who hold those positions, a lot of people out there who hold those positions. And you are fortunate in that you have this YouTube channel that people watch. So you actually don't have to make that argument 100 fucking times. The question becomes, why would you not be prepared to make that argument once? And it seems a really absurd thing to say, well, I've got all the evidence. I'm definitely right, you're definitely wrong. And yet maybe 40% or 50% 50% of the population. In your country, I think you're from the States, 150 million people might disagree with me, but I can't be asked to make that argument even once because, I don't even think it's worth rebutting. Do you see what I mean? That just doesn't even make any sense. It's absolutely worth rebutting, not on the basis of how sound their argument is, but on the basis that there are so many people who believe it, and you have the ability with your YouTube channel to just do it the once, and then you can just point people at that time when you did that argument.
It's like there are people to this day who don't believe that homosexuality is real. They just don't think you can be gay. And I don't think we should give those people a debate. There's so many resources out there. That debate has been had. We recognize that being gay is a real thing. I'm not going to waste my time debating someone like that.
So, in every YouTube video response, there's always that key moment. We always don't get to know what it is on the behalf or on the part of the responder, but there's always that one key thing, isn't there, that more than anything else made the person think, yeah, I've got to make a video response to this. And this was the part for me, because I felt I had something to add. When you said about specifically with relation to homosexuality, what's the point debating people who think homosexuality is wrong or homosexuality isn't a real thing or whatever? I want to give you a real experience, a lived experience. Fucking hell, I hate that term. This happened to me about 10 years ago, and this is the absolute... I'm not making this shit up just for the sake of it, right? This is why I'm making the video, because this is true. And it had a positive outcome. I went to this party. There was these guys, these 4 guys I didn't know. They'd had a few drinks. I'd had a few drinks. We'd been chatting throughout the night. The conversation turned on, I don't know how, I can't remember how, but it turned on to homosexuality, and they were saying it's unnatural, it's wrong. And they were saying all this stuff, and I thought, I'm going to tackle this. So I said, actually, I'm quite interested in modern evolutionary synthesis, evolutionary theory. And I said, what you're saying is wrong. The understanding isn't necessary. Actually, it might not be unnatural, right? If that's the key criteria for you, it might not necessarily be unnatural, because if it was unnatural, it's unlikely to have survived and to have the numbers of especially homosexual men, when men's sexuality tends to be so polarized. So then I made a sort of gene-centered argument there. I won't make the argument now. And I said, look, there's your argument. I said, that argument might be wrong, it might be right, but it shows you that arguments of that type can be made. And it shows you actually that just to take this position that homosexuality is unnatural is not necessarily the case, as also evidenced by the fact that we see homosexuality in the natural world in other species. Now, I know what you might say, acceptance of homosexuality shouldn't depend upon it being natural, and I also mentioned that point to him about all the other things that we do that aren't natural and we don't have a problem with them. The interesting thing was, when I made that argument, right, regardless of whether you think it should all depend upon that argument, it made a fucking difference. 3 of those 4 guys said they'd had a change of heart and it made them view it differently. Now, okay, maybe that could have been just that they felt a bit awkward, like I was accusing them of being bigoted or whatever, but I didn't really go down that line. I didn't accuse them of being bigoted. I just made the argument, right, and left them, didn't sort of, down on them for having their opinions. About half an hour later, the conversation ended, we split up, we all went to get beers. About half an hour, maybe an hour later, one of the guys came up to me, put his arm on my shoulder and said, what you were talking about earlier on about homosexuality and stuff, he said, I never heard any of that before. He said, seriously, that's put a totally different perspective on it for me. I'm really glad that you said all of that. It's made me view it all in a different light. So I wanted to say that because these were guys that I think you would have fucking written off, right? And that would have been a miscalculation on your part. And that was the point that I wanted to make.
Of course, I think it's important to educate people. And if I feel like someone is genuinely asking questions and genuinely wants to know something, I don't have a problem talking and explaining things. But when it's someone who clearly has an agenda and all they want to do is yell about how you're wrong and they're not actually going to listen to you, then there's no point in having a debate.
Okay, so this was just the last bit that I wanted to respond to, Riley. And to be honest, this bit seemed absolutely eminently reasonable grounds on when you would entertain a debate with people and not entertain a debate with people, but it's slightly different grounds to the grounds that you were making in the rest of the video. Absolutely, if somebody's not really interested and all they want to do is have a pop at you, and they're not really open to any kind of a discussion, well, there's no point having a discussion if somebody isn't open to a discussion. I would grant you that one. on, but the rest of the time, this is the point, yes, it's worth having the discussion. It's always worth having the discussion in the general, right? Maybe not with a specific person who has that position, but if it is something that a lot of people believe and you believe that they are wrong, why would you not have the discussion just because you believe they're massively wrong? It's like if they're a little bit wrong, right? If they're a little bit wrong and they've got some evidence going for them, then you'll have the discussion. But if they're miles off track, you're not going to have the discussion. Surely that's the most important, that's the most critical time to make your arguments. That's the most critical part to have the debate, because it's when people are the most wrong. Okay, well, thank you for that. Thank you for listening, everybody. I think we're done here now. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
So there's going to be a few of you out shearing this time, then?
About 40, I'd reckon.
Something for the ladies?
Oh, yeah. 2 bottles of sweet sherry, mate. Looks like we've overdone it with the sherry.
Yeah,